it's overwhelming, but it's also our jobs.
Mm-hmm. Our job is only going to get harder.
It's worrisome.
This is something that's unprecedented.
Now is not the time to be a cowboy. No one has anything to prove. We're all in this together.
Welcome to Reporting from the Front Line of a Pandemic. I'm Lauren Granada, and I'm joined by Adam Harding, reporter at WNBC in New York. Adam, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And congratulations on your new reporting job in New York.
Thank you. Yeah, very interesting time to be moving up to New York.
My first question for you is, how have you had to adjust the way you work?
I'll tell you, I've never seen anything like this. So my very first day was about the same week when the city shut down. So I started on day one, walking into 30 Rock, and I'm like, wow, this is this building that to me has always represented so much in news. And within 5 minutes, they were like, all right, just go out, report. And I have not worked. I'm trying to think if I've even stepped foot back in the building since then. I may have been back one other time, but for the most part, we're not working whatsoever out of the newsroom. The field crews meet your photographers, so like I'll take an Uber or a Lyft or I'll walk, and I'll go meet my crew remotely. We will social distance when we're together. We wear masks. I have gloves. There was a 2-week period where I actually had to work from home. So this was literally, this screen right here was my office for 2 straight weeks. And I had never worked from home ever in my years doing this. There's way too many. So I was trying to learn how to adapt really quickly. And so what I ended up doing was I would do basically what you're doing right now is I would open up FaceTime or Skype or Zoom, and then I would screen record interviews with different people. And then I went on my phone and I downloaded a microphone app. And so what I would do is I would just track my packages into my phone through the app, and then I would email it to a content producer with my script, and then he or she would edit it back at the station. And that was how we would basically work remotely. And I literally did not leave my room, my apartment for several weeks. And then last week I started going back out in the field. And, we have a long pole that we put our mic on. That way we stay distant from the people that we're talking to. We wear masks, the photographer, the reporter, we do our best to stay as far apart from each other. Some crews travel separately. So we're doing everything that we can to stay socially distant. And then we're also doing a lot of these things like on the computer that I have never done before. So it's definitely been a huge learning curve for me. But hopefully, we'll start to, familiarize ourselves enough with kind of this new workflow where it just kind of becomes second nature to us.
How did it feel to not have a proper introduction and you didn't have a proper orientation? How hard was that?
I think it's only as hard as you make it. I think for me, I've been doing it long enough in many different cities where, I'm comfortable and confident in what I do. And so for me, it was more just like it would have been an opportunity to sort of dip your toe in the shallow end and then, get into the deeper end, down the line. But for me, it was very much a trial by fire. And just jump right into the deep end. And I think in a lot of ways that may have helped me just because I didn't have time to worry about, gosh, I wish I had this training, or gosh, and look, it's been a month and a half, and there are still so many things I don't know just about the SOPs, which are the standard operating procedures. I don't know how to use this program, or who do I call for this? Like, those are things that I will learn, and I would have learned a lot quicker had we not been in the environment that we're in. But I also think on the other side of the coin, I've been thrust into the biggest story that I've ever covered, and there's no time to worry about what you don't know. Just focus on what you do know and work off of that. So in a lot of ways, I've used work for me as it's just really centered me, where I'm just like, all right, like, what you're doing. This is the story. Just go cover it. And so I'll learn the people and the different programs and all that I don't know right now. That I can learn. But for me, it's just like, focus on what you do know, do the job. And I think a lot of people have responded well to that. And I try not to let the lack of, maybe proper training or orientation slow me down any. I just say, look, maybe I'm doing it a little bit differently than you guys normally do it. I'm just going off of what I know. Let's just get something clean on the air, and that's that. So, it really hasn't been too difficult.
And you just came from Atlanta. You were a reporter there for several years. So how has reporting in New York been different, especially in the epicenter of the virus in the U.S.?
Yeah, it's definitely different. So I was in Atlanta for 5 years, a little over 5 years. I was at the CBS station down there. And I was actually mostly for the last 3.5 years on the morning show. And now I'm on the night show. So I do the 6 and the 11 o'clock. So, it's literally a 180. My work shift is from 2 to 11, but instead of AM, it's now PM. I think for me, the difference is I think it's tough right now to really compare the two markets, only because in New York, I've only done coronavirus stories. And that was not the case, obviously, during my time in Atlanta. I think I have learned from working in Boston as well. The Northeast the Northeast is known for one style of news, or they've gotten very good at one style of news. And in Atlanta, it was very different in that, New York, Boston, it's very fast-paced. It's breaking news. It's get the latest on the air right now, running and gunning. And then in Atlanta, it was, I wouldn't say that it was slower, but the news content was a lot different. And so then we, during my 5 years there, we spent a lot of time focusing on storytelling and crafting like really nat sound heavy packages. And then here it's like go, 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 go. So it's very, very different in that respect. And then there's, little things. Every market operates differently. So for example, in New Hampshire, which is where I met my wife, who also works in news, the Attorney General would handle homicide cases. Okay, so you would go to the Attorney General. When I worked in Boston, the Attorney General would not handle those kinds of cases. Then you move down south, there's a whole different. So these are the things like what I was talking about earlier. There's a lot of the minutiae, sort of, the little details, changes in between each market. Everyone does everything a little bit differently. Each jurisdiction is different. Each market is different. The job, though, is basically the same. The questions you ask are the same. The way you structure stories are the same. Maybe one market you have more time to, craft a 2-minute package as opposed to another market where you have, 70 to 75 seconds, and that's that. And then New York has the added challenge of it's the biggest city, so, public transportation, even though that's sort of been slowed down because of the virus, you're Ubering to a lot of stories, you're walking to a lot of stories, you meet different field crews. I usually work with 2 crews at once, so I'll have 2 photographers with me, and sometimes I'll come in at 2:30 and I'll pick up, like, let's say there's a reporter who's doing, the other day I went to New Jersey because they had a reporter who's doing basically all of New Jersey coronavirus headlines, so he did the 4 and the 6, and then I would do a package for the 5. So, you come in, you're at 2:30, you're in, I've got to get myself to New Jersey, that takes 30 minutes, then you got to find your photographers. Now it's like 3:15, 3:30, and you have a package on the air at 5. So you're taking all these different elements. I'm working with like 3 or 4 producers. They're giving me, okay, there's this video, here's this log. Okay, we just got this new piece of video. Why don't we flip this around? So there's a lot that's thrown at you that's, I think, unique to a market this size. But, the basics of the job, not to mention the fact that, New York is the epicenter. I'll tell you, people, I think, up north, in the Northeast, in New York and Boston, I think they have a reputation for, maybe being, to the outside, to some people, they might come across as short or rude. I found them to be incredibly embracing of making sure that this story is told, and people, I don't think anybody has told me no when I'm like, hey, I just want to learn a little bit more about this. Everyone's been really open and wanting to help cover the story. I mean, I think everyone says, this was exactly what they saw post 9/11, how the city and the state came together in a time of great tragedy. And we're seeing that here, where the death toll is in the tens of thousands across the state. New York City alone is over 10,000. And, you meet so many different people who are affected by this, and it's literally everyone is affected by this. It's, I can show you right now, right outside of my window, I'm on my computer. I don't know if you can see, but there's maybe a dozen cars on the street right now.
Wow.
And that's Manhattan. So, this city is going through something that it's never seen. The whole world is. But New York has been hit especially hard. And I think there's a sense of, people wanting to come together in this time of great tragedy. And so, that's definitely something that has been unique and, early on in my time here that I've experienced.
And how difficult has it been to keep up the communication with your producers and photogs, as well as just interviewing people? How hard has it been with social distancing, not being able to physically talk to them proximity-wise?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we have a nightly Zoom meeting for the 11 o'clock news. And because I had spent 2 weeks working at home, when I came back last week, it was my first time in on the Zoom calls because I was working primarily dayside shifts from home. And so I did a Zoom meeting with our executive producer, 2 producers, our content producers, and then the other reporters. And I don't know, maybe there was a dozen people on the screen with us. And it was the first time I had ever seen 10 of them. And I've been here now for, 6 weeks, and I don't know my coworkers. So that in and of itself was a trip. I was like, oh, wow, okay, nice to put a face to a name. It's definitely, there's a lot of communication. I think the most important thing you can do in any circumstance is over-communicate in this business because, some places that you work, you'll find that even though this is a communications industry, that there is a lack of communication, and that can be very detrimental. Here, it's like everyone wants everyone to know everything. So I'm constantly in contact with my executive producer, the 11 p.m. producer, the 6 p.m. producer, the content producers in between, and each reporter is given their own content producer each different day. So they'll say, okay, I can cut this video for you. I can feed that to you. Do you want to feed me this? And then, oh, hey, can you look up what this is for me? I need that. So you have to be really on top of that. And then no matter where you work, if you end up working with a field crew, if you have a photographer, I cannot overstate the value in making sure that you are over communicating your vision. And what I mean by that is it's not just a one-way street where you as the reporter, okay, this is what I want to do for the story and this is how the story is going to be. It shouldn't be that way. It should be, okay, you and your photographer, hey, okay, this is what I'm thinking. What are your thoughts on that? And then you guys collaborate. I can't tell you how many stories I've done where I went in my head the night before thinking, okay, this is how I'm going to do the story. And then I'll talk to my photographer about it the next day during the shoot. And he or she will say, well, what if we tried this? And then they ended up coming up with this idea that I never even thought of, and it made the story that much better. So you're always having to, you should always want to talk, have a dialogue, over communicate what you're thinking. They do the same, and then hopefully the two ideas come together in the end. I will say, in terms of interviewing people, other than the fact that we have to hold a boom pole out with a microphone, that's a little tricky. But I don't think it's been too much change, other than the tools that we're using to collect the sound. The questions are still the same. How we get to people is a little bit different. I've done a lot of FaceTime interviews, which I've really never done before, and so that's definitely been a change. But I don't think it's been such a change, because to me it feels like you and I are having a conversation the same way I would have a conversation with somebody. Yeah, we're not face to face, but we're face to face virtually. So in that respect has changed. But really, I would say communicate, because your producers, you're the eyes and ears on the ground. So what your producer might think is appropriate for the story, or how the vision for the story is, you're the one out in the field. So you have to communicate to them, no, this is what I'm seeing, or yeah, why don't we play up this? This is what I'm hearing. And then the same goes for your photographer and or editor, depending on if you have one or multiple.
Is there a particular story that stands out to you that you've covered so far in New York?
Well, that's tricky, only because everything has been coronavirus related. There was one day, I've probably done, if I had to ballpark it, what's today, April 20th? I don't know, maybe 60 or 70 packages. All but one were coronavirus related. And the one was breaking news, and then that actually never even made it to air, because the president cut in with a press conference. And so everything I've actually turned has been on the coronavirus. I will say that there were a couple of stories that I've done that have gained national exposure. So there was one story I would say there was two stories, and they're both more uplifting. So the first one was a young guy in Brooklyn who flew a drone over to his neighbor, because he saw a girl across the street dancing on the roof, and he wanted to ask her out, but because he couldn't leave his building, he flew a drone over to her and put his phone number on it, and then they started doing TikTok dates, and then that got picked up by like People and Extra and all that stuff. And then the following week, I got a call from our producer, one of our senior producers, and he said, and I had already shot another story for this day, and I'm thinking my day is going to go one way. And just always be open to your day never going the way you think it's going to go, and that's a lesson pre-corona, post-corona. Like, that should be, everyone watching should understand that you have to be able to adapt and change like that. So I had shot on my days off an interview with a girl, and I thought, okay, when I go in on Wednesday, I was starting my week on a Wednesday, I was working Wednesday through Sunday, I said, I've already got this interview in the can. Wednesday rolls around, I pitch the story, and they're like, we love it, can we save it, because we want you to do something else. Great, what are you thinking? Well, there's this guy who's a landlord in Brooklyn, also Brooklyn, who wants to waive the rent for everyone. He's got like 200 tenants, and he wants to waive the rent for all 200 for the entire month of April. And they go, we've already tried reaching out to him. It's kind of a gamble, because we haven't heard back from him. We have no indication if he'll talk. It's a crapshoot. And can you get over there and see if he'll talk? So we get over there, and he runs a garage. He has a family-owned garage, and I'm talking to his son, and his son was like, "Yeah, I don't, he does that. We don't like the media attention. We're not doing it for the publicity, or whatever. We're just, these people are our neighbors. They're our friends. They're our family. That's why we did it." And I said, "Yeah, I hear what you're saying." I said, "But I think it's a great story, and it's a hopeful story in a time when a lot of people are struggling, and a lot of people are looking for hope, and you guys are providing a great beacon." And so they ended up saying, "All right, he's going to come by in like an hour. He'll do the interview. Let's not make a big deal about it, whatever." So we do the package, and as we were shooting it, I knew it was really good. But as we were editing it, I was like, "Yeah, this is a really good story." And sure enough, the story runs. I get a bunch of emails and texts saying, like, people in the newsroom were like, we were holding our breath watching the story, because it was like they couldn't believe that this guy. It just sounded too good to be true. Well, anyway, so the story ends up going on The Daily Show. He was on Ellen. The president tweeted it. President Facebooked it, and it just went. It really went viral in a day, a day or two, and so that one, I think just because enough people had sent it back to me to be like, "Oh, did you see that it got picked up by here?" And, "Oh, did you see the president tweeted about it?" I said, "Oh, interesting." It doesn't really, affect my day-to-day stuff, but I think just because of that, it stuck out to me as being something very memorable. And then on top of that, enough people had reached out to me the day that it ran from the station, being like, "We didn't even know if you were going to get the story in the beginning of the day. It was a crapshoot." And that's why, again, it was one of those days where I thought my day is going to be this way, and then it turns out my day went that way. And you just have to be open to the change, because if I had sort of said, "No, I've got this other story," I would have missed out on this amazing opportunity, this amazing story. And so I would say those are probably the two that stick out the most. But I hesitate to put any one story over another, because everything is sort of under that Corona umbrella right now that we're facing.
Mm-hmm. And obviously there are so many stories that you could cover. How does your news station determine what you want to include in the newscast, as far as keeping it balanced and deciding for yourselves what you want the viewers to see?
Well, first of all, I think every day starts with, what are the stories that you have to cover, right? Every newsroom operates with, okay, these are the stories, A, B, C, all through, Z, whatever, that we need to cover. Okay, the governor's got a press conference at 11 a.m. The mayor's speaking at noon. Those are, New Jersey's governor, Connecticut's governor, so those are the stories that every day, we have to hit. And then it depends. It depends on what stories the reporters are enterprising and what stories they're bringing to the table. So, for example, I had pitched a story on my very first day. I walked into the building at 9:30. This was on a Monday, and I was told that there was going to be no orientation. But I expected that, and I thought that there would be training, because normally when you start at a station, you go out for a day or two with another crew, and you just learn how they operate. And the editing system is different from station to station, or you might use iNews, you might use ENPS, you might use this program called Delete. It's all the same, but it's also different. So that training just sort of smooths everything over for you. So I walked in, it's 9:30, no training, no orientation, everything got canceled. They're in the morning editorial, and I did not know anybody. And I'm standing in the meeting, and they said, "Okay, we want you to go cover, we've got this set up for you. It's the guy who works on Broadway, and his wife does work for a nonprofit. They're now both working from home, and they have a 4-year-old that they also have to teach." now they're homeschooled, because all the schools in the city were closed. They were also playing the role of teacher. And so, okay, great. But I had also had my own, I wanted to come in prepared on day one. So I had also come in with a couple of other stories. One of them was there was a bunch of kids who around the country were tweeting out their performances for like their senior high school year plays that they weren't going to get to perform because the school year had effectively been canceled at that point. And so for a lot of these kids, it was their last opportunity to sing. And so this Broadway star, and the reason, the New York connection was it was a Broadway star, Laura Benanti. She was tweeting, I believe they were calling them sunshine songs. And I said, it would be really nice if we did sort of like an uplifting story, And they were like, yeah, we love that. We think that's great. Now, did we have to do the story that day? No. Could we have done it tomorrow, next week, never done it? Absolutely. I mean, it was not one of those, it has to be done today on Monday, March 16th. But I think there's something to be said for, with viewership, so many people are watching right now. I think part of us feels like we want to give whatever small little bit of hope or a smile that we can. I think that goes a long way. And we also understand that we have to provide the critical information that they need. I mean, literally life-saving information. But also not lose sight of the fact that there are really amazing people in all of our communities, not just New York, but in every market across the country. There are amazing people doing amazing things in these uncertain times, and I think those people deserve recognition as well. And so I think every day it depends on what the news of the day is. It depends on, the president and the governor could hold back-to-back press conferences, and your entire newscast from 4 to 6:30 could be gone. You just don't know. So I think there needs to be a good balance of is what the news of the day is we have to cover. And then, okay, what are people bringing to the table today? What are the reporters enterprising? What are they seeing in their communities that they want to highlight? And sometimes they're like, feel-good stories like kids getting a chance to sing or a landlord who's paying the rent for 200 people. And then sometimes it's like, okay, what do you do if you own a barbershop and now that's closed? How do you make ends meet? Or what do you do if you are an Uber driver? And so some Uber drivers are like putting up, plastic sheets in their cars now. So, those are stories that reporters are enterprising because it's what they're seeing in their communities. And some of them are more in line with like feel good, and then some are more in line of, gee, I didn't even think about this. This is a interesting little angle. So, but I think there's a good mix.
What kind of feedback have you been getting from viewers?
Well, I got a couple of tweets just the other night because my mask was sliding down my face. So that was an adjustment. I guess I never realized how difficult it was to talk with a mask on. And I tend to talk a lot, as you can tell. And I must have just, it was a windy day, and I must have not put it on correct. So they're very attentive to that, and that's great on them because, they're just trying to look out for me. And I didn't even realize that, I had put it on wrong. So that's one thing. I would say I've worked long enough where I've seen both sides of a reaction or a reception from an audience. Sometimes there's people who aren't happy with coverage, and then there are times where I think people are incredibly appreciative of what you do, and I understand that I meet a lot of people on their worst days. It's oftentimes not good that you have to talk to me, but I approach every story with the same level of empathy and zero prejudgment on my part going into any story. I'm very objective with how I approach things, and And there are sometimes you have to talk people into agreeing to talk to you, and that's not easy. I think the reception that I've gotten in New York, probably because of the magnitude of the story and the weight that the city has had these last few weeks. I would say it's been 100% appreciative, and really something special to witness. The only other thing I can really liken it to was when I was in Boston. I covered the Boston Marathon bombing in 2013, and that week it was I was off on Mondays and Tuesdays, but it was Marathon Monday. I was at home with my wife, and we watched it on TV, and I immediately saw the explosion, and I ran in, jumped in the shower, threw on a suit, and just ran into work. Didn't even bother to call and ask if they needed me. I knew it was one of those situations where it was all hands on deck. And that whole week, I remember, that entire week like it was yesterday for me, but especially that Thursday night where the Tsarnaev brother was in the boat, and everybody, the city was shut down, everything was on lockdown. We were on the air so I can tell you, so I finished up my live shot Thursday night at 11:15, the Thursday after the marathon. I was getting ready to go home. I was just getting to the car with my photographer when I was told, hey, we need you to pivot and go to MIT. There's been a shooting. And they ended up, normally we would have gotten off the air at 11:30, and now we're in wall-to-wall coverage. We never got off the air. And then, obviously, we learned that an officer had been shot, and then there was the police chase down into Watertown, and that was around the same time that the young man was carjacked in the Mercedes. And then it ended up being a manhunt in Watertown for the one suspect who had gotten away, the 19-year-old Jahar. And we ended up staying on the air. We never got off the air. I don't even think they never once went to commercial. So we were on the air so when I got in I probably got in at like noon on that Thursday. And then I was up at work covering the story live until 6:30 the Friday night. So whatever that, I'm not good at math. I went to Emerson. But we ended up getting so many viewer emails and comments that our news director printed them all out and lined the wall when you walk into Channel 7. So it's on Bullfinch Place in Government Center, but when you walk into the building, you actually walk down into, because you work there, but you walk down into the newsroom. Well, when you walk down, there's like this hallway right before you get into the newsroom, and we had a sea of letters just saying, thank you for all that you guys do. Thank you for working to keep us safe, providing us up-to-the-minute coverage. We're so thankful for you in our community. And that I had never seen anything like that before. And, I have not seen anything like that since. But I think that this would probably be the next closest thing that I've experienced to a community showing its appreciation for everything that the media does. I mean, look, we are oftentimes referred to as, the first draft of American history. So we are the ones reporting on the front lines of what's happening in real time. And we can go back and look when everything is over at the over arc of whatever we're covering. But in the moment, we're bringing viewers, literally, this is what we see. And I think especially now, so many people are quarantined, self-isolating. They are trusting us more than ever. I think our job. I think our job is always incredibly important. And I think I think reporters, journalists, I think they're vital to any society, and a free press is needed. But I think it's really highlighted in a time like this when everybody is craving the newest piece of information, and they're trusting us to give it to them from an unbiased position. Like these are facts, and so I would say the reception has been overwhelmingly positive and very appreciative. That was a really long answer, by the way. I'm sorry.
No, it was great. Obviously, with all of that social responsibility, I assume it's a bit of stress. So how are you handling that kind of stress, especially now with the social distancing? You know, you mentioned that your wife is back in Atlanta. How are you handling all of that?
That's a really good question. You're really good at this.
Oh, thank you.
I'm
really trying.
No, you're going to have a great
that
career.
means a lot.
Great career.
Thank you.
Listen, first of all, I appreciate you asking that question. I think that's a really important question. And I've long said, well before covering the coronavirus, but I've long said that, journalists need to, everyone needs to take time to show themselves, love and peace. And, it's a very, in and of itself, it's an incredibly stressful job. We're constantly under deadline. Oftentimes we're meeting people on their worst days. We're covering incredibly difficult, complex, sad, emotional, layered stories. And it's hard sometimes to come home and turn the switch off. You know what I mean? A lot of the time, we're human. We carry emotions. We are with people when they're down, and we're with people when they're up. I remember I covered Sandy Hook. I was there the first day for 9 straight days, and I carry a lot of. I can still hear one particular interview in my head, and that was 8 years ago, almost 7.5 years ago. So you carry a lot of it with you, and there's no stigma in asking for help when you get home, or if you're thinking about something and you need to talk to somebody. It's best to talk to someone, and I know the companies that I've worked for at least have been really forthcoming and open about providing assistance, which is great. When you cover a story like this, I think there's there's a level of the sheer amount of just bad news, especially in New York, with the death toll, in the tens of thousands, and in the city, I'm living literally in the city hit hardest in the entire country. And I'm in constant communication every day with families who have lost people. I did a story a week ago with a woman. She contacted me. I was put in touch with her, and I talked to her. She needed help getting her mom, who had organ failure. She couldn't get a specialist because no hospital in the city or the state, this was in New Jersey, were accepting hospital transfers because hospitals had been transformed into, coronavirus wings. And we got a positive update, right after I said, and I, in the interview, I said, what can we do to help you? Like, what do you need? And she said, I need to find a specialist that will accept a transfer. And after the story ran, the mom got transferred. And I'm not saying it's because the story ran. I'm just saying in terms of a timeline, after the story ran, she got transferred. And the daughter had texted me and said, thank you for the story, and good news, mom's getting transferred. And 3 days ago, she died. So, you run the gamut. You're thinking, great, mom's on the up, and then a couple days go by, and you find out that she died. And that, everything weighs on you. And when I was working my first job, would I have thought maybe it would get easier the more you do it, the longer you do it? I probably would have thought, as unfortunate as that sounds, I don't know if I do think it gets any easier. I think maybe how to approach people a little bit differently. And I think you have a better idea of what kind of questions you want to ask in a delicate manner in delicate times. But it doesn't get any easier in terms of, every story is somebody's loved one, is somebody's, family. And so I say all of that to say, this has really kind of heightened everything, I think, for me, at least, because I'm all alone in this massive city. I moved here right before everything shut down, thinking I'll get myself into a routine, whether that's a work routine or a social routine or familiarize myself with the city. I have not been able to do that because everything is closed. And then my wife, who works at CNN, she and I can't see each other because New York has a 14-day quarantine if you leave the city. And if I were to go down to her, which is the only thing in the world I want to do right now, but I can't, A, because I don't think a lot of people want to travel, and I understand that, but B, because if I leave New York, I have to go into a 14-day quarantine, but because of my job, I can't do that. Because she works in news too, she can't come up to see me because she would have to go into quarantine, and she can't do that. So we talk every day over FaceTime, and it's tough. And I think the hardest part is we don't know when we'll get to see each other again. So that's difficult. I'm finally, within a 3 or 4 hour drive from my family, as opposed to a flight, and I can't see them. I have not been able to move into my apartment. This is my temporary housing, and NBC has been incredible. So they're giving me 3 months of temporary housing because I cannot get anything delivered to my my apartment. Nobody's delivering beds. Nobody's delivering sofas. Nobody is wanting to come into the city to make these deliveries. It's tough. It's tough to find, basic. I couldn't find masks. Couldn't find Clorox. Couldn't find whatever. So the station's been sending me stuff. My mom's been sending me stuff. But it's tough. And then you're working from home for 2 weeks, and you really don't leave like a 500 square foot apartment. That is a challenge too. I just try to keep everything in perspective. I'm genuinely and generally a very upbeat person. Everyone would always tell you that I'm the guy in the newsroom who would always sing, and I think I probably to some degree use that as a defense mechanism because you can get worn out mentally and physically and emotionally from the job. So I try to always be in as good of a mood as I can. So I try to keep everything in perspective and just realize, I can only control what I can control. I'm thankful to have work and do what I love doing. And, I find great value or appreciation in the fact that people are trusting me to tell me, to share their stories with me. And, and then, it stinks, don't get to see my wife, but in the grand scheme of things, there are people going through way worse stuff than I am. And so I can't let myself be knocked down because of that. I think the job is so much more important than any one person and the responsibility. And I truly believe that it's a calling. So, I can't feel sorry for myself that I can't see my wife, and I can't feel sorry for myself that I didn't get trained on every program, and I can't feel sorry for myself that I don't know this city as well as I wish I could, because none of that in the grand scheme of things really matters. What matters is connecting with this community and telling this story in real time. And when it's all over, I'll get to see my wife again. But in the meantime, we're just making do. So it's difficult, but I remind myself every day that do not feel sorry for me because I consider myself lucky. So I have my health, I have my family that's staying safe, and and that's why for me work has really been a blessing because it's keeping me busy, it's keeping me focused, it's keeping me driven. So it's difficult, but we're getting through.
And what would you say is the biggest takeaway from all of this so far?
Oh man, that's So I don't know. I would say I think
Or anything new that you've learned from this kind of coverage?
no. I think there are small things, like I think you kind of learn how to move a lot quicker and write a lot faster. And I've always been a really fast writer as it is, but when the story is constantly updating and changing, and you're turning 3, 4, 5 stories a day, the workflow is a little bit different. And I genuinely don't know how much that is because of coronavirus or how much that is just because it's New York. I don't know. I'll let you know in 6 months. I think the biggest lesson in all of this is, for me, and I can only speak for me. I think for me, it's that the role of journalism right now is more important than perhaps ever, and it's difficult for me to see across the industry people who are slashing positions, newspapers who are letting people go, stations that are furloughing reporters who are taking pay cuts. It hurts to see, because I think they're needed more than ever. And, understanding that news and journalism and TV news and newspapers, it's a business. And even though viewership is up, if ad revenue is not, then, everybody's budget has to adjust. The station that I just came from, they just announced that people were taking being forced to take a 15 to 20% pay cut and furloughs. We don't do it for the money. We don't do it for the fame. We don't do it for the normal hours, which you will quickly learn. But we do it because of the, it's a calling. And so, for me, that's been difficult to see. Companies and stations and newspapers have to make that difficult decision of, in this horrific time right now, where unemployment numbers are astronomical, that a large swath of that is people who are in the journalism field that have been recently laid off, which is difficult. As it's affected some of my friends. So, I think it's just, for me, re-emphasized how just incredibly vital this industry is, and how there is an accountability factor for the future of this country. And the fact is, the information that we're providing is life or death information. And so, we have a letter from the State Department that says we're essential employees. And that's because we are broadcasting and communicating to the masses information that they need to survive. So I think when you boil it down to its most simplest, just that right there, that one sentence right there, you are an essential employee because you are providing people with the communication that is life or death. And so I think that just highlights that is the simplest way of saying how important it is that what reporters do.
And what's your advice to anyone wanting to go into broadcast journalism?
Run! No. No, first of all, I love this question. Because I'm curious. Let me ask you a question. What has been the response that you've gotten when you ask this question to people? What have they told you? I want to see if I agree.
Persistence.
Okay.
And being flexible.
Yes.
And just learning, I guess, throughout every step of your career is basically the gist.
Yeah. So listen, I don't want to sugarcoat anything. It's hard. But I also think anything worth fighting for should be hard, because if it's not hard, then you're not trying hard enough, because everything it should be hard. But it's hard for a number of different reasons. We certainly don't. We're not in it to be rich and on TV. But it's also hard when my first job was for $19,000. Like that's a challenge. But it's a temporary challenge, and you find ways to make ends meet. It's tough when I remember when I started out, I moved 3,000 miles away from my first job. And I was lucky because I had applied to a gazillion jobs, got nothing. Nobody wanted to hire me. Nobody cared about my reel. In fact, I went with Marsha one year to the RTDNA, and I showed my reel to someone, and it did not go over well. And I was crushed. I was like, darn. I thought, here I am thinking like, oh, this is pretty good. I could probably find a job. And then they tore it apart in the seminar session. And I, instead of beating myself up about it, I was like, all right, let me work on ways to make it better. So I had applied to a bunch of jobs, did not get them after college. And I was fortunate in that an Emerson alum, her name is Melanie Falcon, was already at the station that I eventually worked at. She was working at this station in Kennewick, Washington, NBC affiliate KNDU, market 128, 127. And Melanie called me. I was going to say text, but back then we didn't text. This was like pre-text, okay? Don't judge. I'm dating myself.
No judgment.
I know. She called me and said, hey, listen, we're hiring. My news director has asked her, the news director asked her if she knew anybody who was looking for work. And they were probably going to look for a male reporter. And they had gone to Melanie and said, clearly you came in with the right tools. So whatever they teach you at Emerson must be working. Do you know anybody who's looking for work? And Melanie said, oh yeah, actually my friend Adam, I know he wants to be a reporter, and I know he's not working anywhere right now. So why don't you take a look at his stuff? And I never sent her anything. This was before, sending reels on YouTube and stuff. This was when you actually I would have to make physical copies of a DVD and then go to the post office and mail them out in the snow, 5 miles both way. And so I got a call that day or the next day from the news director, and her name is Christine Brown, and she says, Adam, I watched your stuff. I think you're good enough. So I've got a job. It's for an MMJ reporter position, and you're going to work weekends, and you're going to shoot and edit all your own stuff, and it's going to pay $19,000. I cannot negotiate that any further. We do not have it in the budget for you to get flown out here to come meet, to come formally tour the city or the station. She goes, I'm going to give you this weekend to decide whether you want to take it. And if you say yes, I want you to start 2 weeks from Monday. That way you can I was a waiter at the time. She goes, you can give your 2-week notice, and then I expect you on the air 2 weeks from Monday. I was like, oh my God. But this is what I wanted. And so I said, yep, let's do it. Great. I can figure it out. And, and then I ended up getting about a year later, I ended up getting another Emerson kid, a job out there. So we had 3 of us. We called it, what did we call it? It was like WEBN West. Like that's what we nicknamed ourselves, because there was 3 or 4 kids from Emerson that were there. Oh and then a 4th one joined too. It was crazy. And remind you, the newsroom staff was probably like 20 to 25 people, and 4 of them were from Emerson. That's a pretty large percentage, and it's on the West Coast, so it's nowhere near Emerson. And so, and you make so many mistakes your first market. Your video's blue, or the framing of your interview is horrible, or you haven't discovered your voice. And by that I mean, how you approach stories and the way you write stories and the way you track stories, and how, I used to think you would track a package like this, and this is what I'm doing right now live in Washington. And nowadays, I laugh during my tracks. I'm like, huh. And so then you got this guy over here, blah, 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 blah. And I track it like that because that's how I talk. So you're discovering your voice and your rhythm and your cadence, and there's so much about yourself that you learn too. And if I had to put a ballpark number, I would say like 50 to 60% of the people don't make it out of their first jobs because it's really hard. It's really, really hard. But I also think the ones that do make it to their next job, their skin is a little bit thicker and a little bit thicker and a little bit thicker, and then their understanding of the way the industry works and the way that you approach stories or how you find stories or how you pitch stories. It's not even just finding stories. How do you pitch a story? How do you make other people get on board with you doing this story? Mm-hmm. You might think it's interesting, but what if they don't think it's interesting? Make them think it's interesting. And everybody has their own little tools to do that. And then the further you get in your career, the more confidence you build. And now your live shots are better, and now your packages look better. And now all of a sudden, within a few short years, you went from, you can feel like you know a lot when you're at Emerson, and then you get in the real world, and then you realize, well, maybe I don't know as much as I think I did. And then a couple years later, now you're like, all right, now I'm starting to feel more. But then I would also say you're never done learning. No one ever knows everything, and you should never shut yourself off from being open to new things, new ideas. And I just learned the other week how to do what you're doing right now. Please, I don't know how to do any of this stuff. My Instagram, what's that? I don't do any of that. But that's the way it's going. I think you guys have a tremendous leg up than what we had. We didn't have social media for us was never a thing. Like we had thefacebook.com, like literally thefacebook.com. We didn't have walls where we could write on each other's pages. We couldn't share pictures. It was not like that at all. When we first joined, and then they want us to tweet and Facebook for work. What? Like there was like for us that was like a foreign language, and you guys. So like I just discovered this week David Dobrik. Do you know who that is?
Oh,
the YouTube kid.
Yeah.
Like that, but that's like totally up your guys' alley, right? Like
yes, that's it.
Social media and reaching millions of people, through YouTube and Twitter and Instagram.
TikTok.
I downloaded Snapchat once, and I didn't even know what button to hit. I've never used it. It was the most intimidating thing on the planet. But so for me, that's like totally foreign. But to you guys, that's exactly in your wheelhouse. And the great thing is that's sort of where everything's going. So, we always have to be open to learning new things. I have to try to learn. I mean, maybe I gave up on Snapchat. I'll admit that one. But everything else, you want to always, I'm constantly looking to absorb new things. And a lot of that's like storytelling approach. So like when I worked in Boston for 2.5 years, and I got really good at just fast-paced live shots. You show up to a scene, 30 seconds later you're on TV. Like you've got to take in, like I can get to a scene, I can see a PIO, which is Public Information Officer. I can say, okay, I'm on the air in less than a minute. What do we know? And he'll tell me A, B, C, D, and E. And I'm talking to him, but I've got an earpiece in. I'm also doing a mic check. The photographer's putting the equipment on too. He's, get the camera ready, and he's got his backpack on, which is a live viewer, DeGiro, to broadcast the signal from. And we're literally like walking to where we're going to go live. And then the guy's talking to me, okay, this happened. And I'm listening, but I'm also now listening to the show. And I'm like, okay, great, thanks. And then I turn to the camera, and then I'm like, okay, and then I got to put it on TV. I got really good at doing that really fast. And that's the way the market is, and I believe that's what New York will be more like. But then when I moved to Atlanta, it was a lot different. And it ended up being great because then I started to learn so much more about storytelling and crafting like 4-minute packages and not losing the viewer's attention. And I would work with photographers that really cared about like the framing of every single shot. And then I got really big into sound, and I wanted to experiment on a bunch of different things. And that was, again, something that, in my 30s I was learning how to do. And now I'm in my mid-30s, and I'm still learning how to do new things. And so I would say to anyone who wants to do this, wow, this is a long answer. To anyone who wants to do this, you have to be willing to put yourself out there. You have to be willing to move wherever the job is. You have to be willing to always be willing to learn. You always have to be hungry for news. Like, you have to have that burning passion in you, and you have to always think of new ways, because this is an industry that seems to be changing by the minute. As we've kind of transitioned into this digital age, you have to kind of find ways to adapt with the times. There's a reporter at ABC News that I know, Gio Benitez, and his claim to fame was in 2011. He shot an entire package on his iPhone. In 2011, that was a big deal. That was a game changer. You shot a package on your phone? What? Lauren, I probably shot like 20 packages on my phone this week. Okay? But 10 years ago, he was ahead of the game. He was changing with the times. And so, we are learning to adapt pretty quickly, but I think you guys have the advantage of, growing up on this stuff. And so, you have to be willing to adapt. You have to be willing to change. You have to be willing to learn. You want to be a sponge and just soak up everything. And a large part of this industry is about, making contacts and finding what's right for you. Maybe you want to go network. Maybe you want to stay local. Maybe you want to go to top 10. Maybe that's your end goal. Maybe you find that you like small market news. Maybe you like medium market news. Maybe you want to be an anchor. Maybe you want to be a producer. There's really no right or wrong answer. Everyone has their own trajectory. Maybe you want to have a family and you think it's going to be easier to do that in Des Moines, Iowa, as opposed to, New York City. Great. Everyone is different. And so, but there's, there's no kind of like easy answer to say, just do this and you'll be great. I wish it were, but it's not. And, in the industry is frankly going much younger. So like I'm on the way out, obviously. It's only a matter of time. Anybody watching right now probably have my job.
No.
Except for the I'm just kidding. But you have to really love it. You really do have to love it, because it's going to throw you through the ringer a lot. I mean, you're going to work Christmas, you're going to work mornings, you're going to work overnights, you're going to work weekends, you're going to work holidays. You're not going to always get 2 days off. If you do get 2 days off, maybe it's like Tuesday and a Wednesday. Nobody likes Tuesdays and Wednesdays. They just don't. They're like not good days of the week. So, but now that's your new Saturday and Sunday. And when all your friends are going out because they work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and they go out on the weekends, but you're working the weekends, or you're 3,000 miles away when all your friends who just graduated are still in Boston, and you're like, oh man, I really miss it. Understand that like you do what you do for a reason, and there's a lot of sacrifices that come with this job, but there's also a tremendous amount of reward that comes from this job, not financially, but there's a lot of satisfaction in getting to be a part of that first draft of history, and getting to be a part of telling somebody's story, and getting to be a part of a bigger picture, because it's never about us. We're not the story. We just are simply the outlet through which those stories are shared. And so the amazing thing is we have the opportunity every single day when we get home, I can pull up my phone and watch what I just did and be like, this is what I just spent 8 hours on. And not a lot of jobs do that. And deadlines are tough, but also deadlines are something that can make you better, not just in TV news, but just as a better adult. And working under pressure, this is an incredibly intense and pressure-filled job. Not the least of which is because of the business side of things, and people getting cut and all that stuff. Like that's very stressful, but it's also stressful. You've got deadlines. You're talking to people who are having a bad day. You've got 2 packages and 3 VOSATs to shoot today, or there's a lot of stuff that goes into this job that people don't see. They just see what we present on the air for a minute or 2 at a time. but there's so much stuff behind it that I think scares off a lot of people. And so, they go into their first job thinking, oh, I got this. Oh, I was the anchor of WBBN. I don't know about you guys, but I know what I'm doing. And then you get to the real world and you're like, you know what I mean? And so that's just the reality of it. So it's not for everyone. Listen, it's not for everyone. I think you'll learn pretty early on when you're doing it full time if it's for you, and it might involve going a month and a half without seeing your wife and not knowing when that's going to change. But that's what we signed up for. So yeah, good luck to all those kids out there.
Thank you.
Please don't take my job.
Oh my gosh, no. No way. You still have a long way to go. Well, Adam, thank you so much for talking with me, and thank you for all of the work you're doing to keep us safe and informed. And thank all of you for watching this episode of Reporting from the Frontline of a Pandemic. I've been talking with Adam Harding, reporter at WNBC in New York. I'm Lauren Granada.